who's barking at the moment. Okay, and let me just give it 3 more seconds and we will end the poll. And let me just take a quick picture and let me share the results. And here are the results. So you'll see number 3 won. Okay, but it's interesting to see that the results are kind of all over the board. It can be, 1 equal, to 5, close to that, or 2 equal to 4. So I think the interests are varied, and I think part of it is messaging from us back to the prospects and back to the clients. But I think this is, I think this is a great, answer here. So let me stop sharing the results. Let me grab poll number 2 here, real quick. And the question is, this is a multiple choice question. Okay, so what areas would help broaden the message and urgency of 911? A script for selling to clients, a blog that you can use to alert clients, partnering with an E911 consultant for organized sales, educating on federal compliance and liability, and yelling out loud in a meeting you have E911. Okay, Beth, I know that you were reading that first. Okay.
Yeah, so all of my clients are interested because I pretty much do that. You got to have 911.
You gotta have it. You gotta
have it.
Okay, let me.
People don't even bring it up when I'm in the room.
Okay, and let me just finish this out. Let me end the poll. Let me share the results real quick. Let me just. Okay, so here we share the results. So number 3 won, partnering with an E911 consultant, which is very interesting. And yes, we do have some votes. You got to have 911. I think, Beth, you voted 5 times on that one, right? And Fletch 6 times. Okay.
Can I suggest a couple of other things that are missing from that list? I think we as an organization could produce a white paper or 2. I think we could write articles about it and about how to be, E911 awareness kind of things would be useful for both the organization and potentially drumming up leads.
Totally agree with you, John.
And can I tell you how much I loathe the first one? I think that screams liability all over it, and I would not want to have anything to do with creating a script.
Really?
Absolutely not. Because it gives tools to people to sell something that they don't understand.
I agree.
That's interesting. Okay. Well, you got to say something to
we have Martha with us.
I think it's not a bad idea for those that do not understand 911 to actually have some type of points, at least talking points, in order to not a script per se.
Yeah, maybe it's not.
That's hard and fast. It's almost like telemarketing, but talking points is really helpful because then the topic can be brought up, and then those that don't understand 911 like others do, they can say, well, I'm partnering with another consultant that really understands this. Let me introduce you, and we can actually take this project on together. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's
so I would say, isn't what we've written so far talking points? Isn't that kind of the documentation we've produced?
Yeah, sure.
They are, but I think what we haven't done is we haven't told people what not to say. And Martha brings up a good point, right? So one of the big things that I worry about all the time is that, we're and please don't take any offenses. I'm not referring to anybody here, but the last thing you want to do is give an idiot a gun and tell them it's a gun and it shoots people. And we're giving people a lot of information that they're going to take. And if they don't understand it, they're going to misinterpret it and they're going to sound like they know what they're talking about. There's plenty of people that are doing that today, and that's what's causing the problem. So I think we do need to have a script, but that script needs to be very carefully crafted for different skill sets.
And so on that note, I'm going to let everybody in on a secret. This is pretty much how the conversation goes in our task force meetings, with everybody having different ideas and perspectives. And and then we manage that to produce a result. So always exciting to have different opinions and different skill sets and very valued members of our task force.
And let me, at the risk of sounding like Eeyore, which I really don't like to do, please remember that if you're going out to sell this, this is a matter of life and death. And so if you don't know what you're talking about, don't talk about it. Bring in somebody who does. You
I agree.
cannot mess around with this at all.
Yes, so thank you everybody for representing what fun and intelligence we have on the task force and how we engage in great dialogue.
I think that's an understatement, Beth. I think you.
Some of the meetings are more civil than others.
But it's, I have to say, from my point of view, it's extremely satisfying to be in this small little niche of life saving. And when you actually do approach a client that says, we got this handled, we don't need any help whatsoever. And all of a sudden you start, you bring in an expert and they go through the process of questioning exactly how they're doing it. And there's so many different gaps. There's so many different deficiencies in what they're doing. It's really gratifying to actually come up with an assessment, come up with a plan to choose, and then come up with a plan to implement to help them through that process. And also it's very, it can be very lucrative. So there's no reason why you should shy away from it. But again, just like everyone on this team who understands 911, in each of the capacities, there's the network side on the PSAP side, but then on the enterprise side, it's a totally different bag of tricks that you bring to the marketplace. When you do that, you actually provide a service, life-saving service, and then you also alert the organization of the deficiencies that they may have, as well as the liabilities that they're traipsing into, and they don't even know it. So anyway, it's gratifying.
Good points there, Bill. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so let's keep going. So many thanks to Scott last week and Guy Yasika and team for the fireside chat on cybersecurity. We're going to have part B next week, part 2. Have a slide in a moment. And again, as the aha moments continue, share in the chat. But again, because of the smaller group today, don't be afraid to be interactive, as the group has been just now, as an example. Okay, so I just saw this on Facebook this past week, and I thought it was very timely, and I had to share this with you. So it's a message that we've heard at least a few times. So this gentleman put in some new flooring in his kitchen and left a message for whoever pulls it up in the future. And the message says, "We've been trying to reach you about your car extended warranty." So who knows when they're going to take that up, but I figured, you'd get a kick out of that. Okay. So this week, again, we've got Beth and the entire E911 task force. Thank you again, Beth. And next week, we're back with Scott again and Guy and team and continuing the discussion around cybersecurity. Very important. Fran, you're on, I think, right?
Yes, absolutely. So we do have happy hour tomorrow. Tell you more details. But as recommended by Fletch, we're going to play Sctc Brush with Greatness. So you'll see the details in an email, and think of people that you have had a brush with greatness as far as fame, and we'll do a guessing game. So hopefully you can make it tomorrow night and we'll have some fun.
Is it in the form of 3 truths and a lie or something? Or
yeah, it's very similar. So we'll be doing some Q&A. Absolutely.
Okay, Dr. Vondra, and don't forget to talk about some of the songs you're planning on, okay, in the fall. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, since we don't have any prospective members, I don't have to really pitch the benefits so much of the Sctc, although I will add that it looks like I will be going to Enterprise Connect to help recruiting efforts. We've got some folks there. Of course, don't forget we get a discount via membership. I'm still a little bit lagging on attendance for San Diego, which I was anticipating our greatest conference ever with attendance. So if you haven't gotten on board, please get on board. It's very critical as we get the right boat for the Hornblower cruise. We make sure the golf outing is well attended, that we do our rooms and meals properly. So really everybody needs to get to San Diego. It's going to be our first outing as a group in a year and a half after COVID. It's a gorgeous, one of the top, most beautiful spots in the United States, San Diego. So I want to see your name on the registration list. And Barb will be calling you one way or the other. Anyway, and as far as songs go, I'm not going to give you the set list, but I remember once someone asked for a request when we were playing, do you know such and such? And the answer was no, but we know one with all the same notes. With that, I'll turn it back over.
So yeah,
Stick with the 3 chords.
yeah.
D, G, and C.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hey, Chuck, are you going to have any guest appearances in the SIP tones? Any new additions?
Yes, we do have some talent that I'm bringing in. A lady that I played with many, many years ago in a band is going to be doing we're doing a Motown review. So you can't go wrong with Motown. Everyone loves it. You tap your toes. It's all great music. It suits our band really well. So you're going to really hear some top-notch talent as you hear the SIP tones play some pretty tight Motown, and featuring a tremendous vocalist that I've performed with in the past, and also some great jazz songs that we're going to do in our easy listening set. Songs like Misty, Harlem Nocturne, everybody's favorite. So anyways, you got to get there. It's simple as that.
Yeah. I'm not going to miss it, Chuck, just to let you know. Thanks, Chuck. Okay, Beth, over to you.
All right. Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for being here today. And thanks again to our wonderful task force. Steve, I don't know if you have what I think is slide 21 that has everyone's faces on it.
Here we go. Yep.
All righty. Awesome. Thanks. And so this is our great crew of people. And I joked a little bit earlier because we were having some debate among ourselves, but really it's such a talented and smart group of people with a diverse set of experiences. And so that type of a debate has really allowed us as a task force to increase everybody's knowledge and industry awareness. So thank you all to the task force for your commitment to being present and sharing your ideas and agreeing and disagreeing and helping us all. So kudos. Moving on from there, we have, if you skip a slide, I think we'll end up on slide 23 in my deck. Oh, okay. So a little further in, Steve, about the middle of the pack.
Tell me when.
Yep, keep going, keep going. Everybody remembered we're on our 3rd round, so we've been through some of these questions already in our 2nd week. Whoops,
This is it.
Okay.
That's all I got.
Okay, I had it slide 23. Do you have a list of questions on slide 23?
Hold on, let me stop my share.
And maybe I'll, if I need to, I can share.
Yeah, why don't you? Because I might have an older one here.
Okay, let's do that. Okay, let's share that. All right, so is everyone looking at the slide deck here? It says
Yep.
panelist questions day 2.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so as everybody remembered, in our first couple weeks, we had a series of questions. And then in week 2, we started on this list of questions. We had gotten through questions 7 and 8, which were closely related, and just getting ready to go on to question 9. So as a reminder, one of the things that we were talking about in the first 2 questions of this set involves a large campus and how we provide addresses for a large campus and what do we do with first responders when they show up. We looked at some maps and described how some of those things should work. We then talked about the fact that if you had a campus type environment and your own dispatchers on campus, should you make it a PSAP? And we explored those reasons.
Okay, I want to stop you right there just for a second, only because I learned something last week about which I was not aware that I think is critically important.
Okay.
In New York, and possibly other states as well, there are specific rules that are different regarding PSAP identification than the federal rules, and then those that the state that does the actual certification of the PSAPs require. In New York, public buildings that are part of the SUNY system and the CUNY system, City University of New York, are exempted from having to either create a PSAP or route calls directly to the PSAP. This is not part of the emergency response law. It's buried in the executive law in section 717. I was not aware of it. It was a bit of a surprise, but it is a real thing. So contrary to what we may have thought earlier, and it's actually a reasonably new provision. States may have specific exemptions that you need to be aware of, and I can't stress this strongly enough. I wasn't aware of it. So anyway, back to your regularly scheduled programming.
Yeah, thanks for that. Do you want to give a little a summary of, so basically what that means for people who have a campus environment is some states may have different rules about that.
Correct. And my favorite answer is it depends. I mean, I was speaking last week to the SUNY Technology, the SUNY Technology Conference, otherwise known as STC. Not kidding. And this came up, and Fletch and I were having a conversation. I'm like, I think I better reach out to the New York first responder, the coordinator for the state. And I did. Of course, he didn't get back to me until after I'd done the presentation. But what the New York law says is that those buildings and certain other public buildings can route calls directly to their own on-site public safety before they send them out.
Awesome.
That is a change from what we understood.
Thanks for that update.
Sure.
And there are no requirements for PSAP licensing, training, anything.
Now, New York is the entity that certificates, and I intentionally use that word, that certificates PSAPs, but this group is exempt.
So again, they can set up a call receipt for 911 calls without any prescribed training.
Not saying that. But what I am saying is that the calls can be routed directly there. They do not need to go off campus. That is the public safety people do not have to get contemporaneous notification. They need to get, it's perfectly okay if they get the primary notification and there is no contemporaneous notification. Interestingly, also, New York has adopted most of the specific language of Kerry's law, if not making it just a little bit more specific. So the real point that I'm making is knowing your federal stuff is great, but it is not enough.
Well,
awesome.
and just to quickly support that, we're also finding, Steve and I are finding that it's state, plus it's also, so it's federal, state, plus county. So it's really, the legal parts are very complicated and they're not easy to find out. So.
Yeah, a prime example of that is the state of Texas. It's crazy down there.
This is news?
Yeah, I'm feeling most of us laughing right now.
Greg Pittman, you want to weigh in on that? No, but seriously, thank you for that. Again, this is the type of conversation that is really helping all of us. So thank you for bringing that up. Moving on to our next panelist question. Steve, do you want to ask it?
Sure, I'd be glad to ask it, Beth. So Mike and John, do you have a plan for when first responders arrive and how to get them to where the emergency is? And the answer better be yes.
Well, the primary answer is contemporaneous notification. I mean, it starts there. I mean, if you've got a campus large enough to have a response force on it, that contemporaneous notification, the purpose of that is so you can start moving those first responders into position before mutual aid or surrounding response gets there. And that may mean, in my airports, I may be getting somebody there that can administer CPR, maybe nothing more than that. But in many of my airports, I have a full suite of fire equipment. I have a full police force. I can do almost everything the county can do. So one of the primary objectives in that contemporaneous notification is to enable the arrival of the mutual aid support, the support that is going to come from off campus. And that, in the context of an airport, is defined in a thing called an airport security plan. So all these response things and the NIMS integration and what we'll do when that contemporaneous notification comes, I think we've made the point last time, needs to be documented in a way that the responders and the mutual aid people in the surrounding county and the executives all understand exactly what's going to happen when that contemporaneous notification occurs.
Mm.
Mike Smith, would you care to add on to that?
Well, I think I can give you an example of a community college that I work with here in Portland. And basically all of their 911 calls in this campus goes to their own security force. And then they dispatch people or dispatch 911 calls to the 911 center. So it's a big campus, and I showed you last time that campus on a diagram, so you could take a look at it with the one address, this one right here. So if you have I think the big question here is if you've got somebody calling 911 from let's say a CT building, and the main address is CC. So this is why you have to have first responders. They're coming to CC, and you're going to have somebody be able to escort them to that CT building to do that. And that's how they do that at this community college right now. So it's interesting. And Martha brings that point up with New York. So I'm going to have to go to the PSAP here and find out if that is true here in the state of Oregon.
Thank you for holding the line. This is Adam Raymond from the.
Could you mute whoever is making a call?
I got it.
So one of the things that's in most of my airports thing is they have predefined meet points with the city and county, whoever's doing response to the site, in addition to those resources that the airport has on premise. And those predefined meet points are places where we send people to get them through. Because remember, my airports are all gated. They're fenced. You can't get on it without the right credentials. So we've got to send people to those gates, to those predefined meet points, to get the emergency responders on the campus as quickly as possible. That whole process of responding, getting through the gate, and getting to the location on the campus takes a lot of time, which is why the parallel effort of sending emergency medical techs and police staff and fire staff to the scene of the incident, as well as to meet the mutual aid, is kind of a dual-pronged effort that occurs when we get that contemporaneous notification.
Yeah. And I'd also like to add real quick that the ICS policies, the very first things that they dictate is to establish that meet point. It's critical for all the reasons mentioned.
That's a different meet point, Mark, than I'm talking about. There is a meet point at the scene, yes, and NIMS requires the establishment of that point and all the command chain that comes from that. But I'm talking about, they got to get on the campus. So we've got to have somebody at gate 14 at the opposite end of the airfield that can not only get them through the gate, but has the authority to drive on the airport and get them to the location as fast as possible.
And I think too, it's really critical that you work with the local PSAP and have some floor plans and stuff. I think the biggest thing that I tell my clients is, what happens after hours? How are they going to get someplace after hours? And if you don't have a plan in place to provide that location information, then you're in a world of hurt.
Yeah, so what we're saying is that this is a good question to be asking the client. Do you have a plan? And if not, they need a plan, because if the first responders show up and there isn't a plan, well, then that's really critical.
Yeah.
Now, in my case with airports, the FAA requires this plan. It's part of their submission to be an operating certificated airport. You have to have this plan. So my airports tend to have them in various states of goodness, but they all have them.
Yeah. So.
All righty. So I'm going to move us on to the next question so that we have time. And this one is, Steve,
Greg.
Go ahead.
Okay. So Greg, how do I deal with false 911 calls originating from my system? Of course, it'll never happen, Greg. So it's a theory. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So as we all know, on most multi-line phone systems, it's common to dial an access code, usually of 9 when making an outside call. And when provisioning the system to be Kerry's Law compliant, sometimes an unintended side effect can be misdialed 911 calls. So what we call a false 911 call is one that ends up at the PSAP, but it's not an emergency, right? And just so you know, some jurisdictions have ordinances that provide penalties for nuisance or false 911 calls. And I'll get into a real world example here in just a minute. But so really this is most often, but not always, but most often an unintentional dialing of 911 when they're trying to place another call, for example. So the digits 911 are dialed, followed by additional digits. And this can be taken care of through policy and proper dial plan management, and that minimizes the risk. And by configuring the dial plan tables in the PBX, most systems can recognize 911 plus additional digits being dialed as being different from just 911 being dialed. Now, that does insert a minor delay at the end of dialing 911, but the gain in dialing efficiency and reduction of false 911 calls, often should be achieved by doing that. It's not a great thing. You never want to put in a delay, if you can help it. I have a client that insisted on that, and the vendor who was programming it, which wasn't me, thankfully, I wasn't touching any of that, but the vendor that did it required them to sign something saying, we do want you to put this delay, and actually what they were doing is playing a recording. Is like, you've made an emergency call. If you didn't intend to, hang up now. And I've also had clients suggest, well, let's just change the access code to 8 or some number that's not 9. And I'll tell you, the experience I've had, and this is real world stuff here, is that didn't help. I mean, they still had a lot of false 911 calls, that the local public responders considered nuisance, and they would fine them. They would come out, of course, every time, and it got to be so many, they would still fine them. So even when they changed to an 8, and this was an on-premise system, this client now has a hosted system, and so now everybody's back to dialing 9. But that's what I was going to say, is that's part of the problem. It doesn't necessarily fix the issue by changing the access code, but it can lead to confusion, with your users and all that sort of thing. So another point, and I know I'm going kind of fast here, but another thing, to talk about is really the user should be trained to stay on the call if they make an inadvertent 911 call, to inform the PSAP staff of the mistake. Now, some places will still dispatch emergency personnel anyway. Others may not, but regardless, you would hope that they would still appreciate that information, that the people stayed on there. But people, most staff, as I'm sure a lot of you have seen, are very reluctant, and they're scared, and they don't want to get in trouble, so they hang up, which is not a good thing to do. So really, you and your client should be trying to build a relationship, not fuel a confrontation. And this is really a good point to work out, kind of like as Mike said, and John, to work out with public safety prior to the real event happening. So, one other thought here is that make sure you run whatever your plan is, not just for this question, to avoid inadvertent calls, but any of this, right? I mean, make sure you run this plan by your client's internal risk management folks, as well as human resources. And I mean, there's a whole host of groups that really need to be involved, before you start. And, as we've mentioned, it's a great idea to talk to the local PSAP as well, just to make sure they know what you've got going on.
Mm-hmm. This is also another good supporting argument for contemporaneous notification. If those false calls are coming through and you set up contemporaneous notification, my airport operations center or the campus security office is going to have a clue as to how frequently this is occurring and who's doing it, and maybe they can provide some education or some guidance to prevent it from happening in the future.
Yep.
Yeah, so what this is all pointing to, and thank you very much, Greg and John, is that we as technologists tend to think, oh, 911, it's a technology that my clients have to have. but it's really different from that. There's processes and behind the scenes things that are equally important. And I think that's a great lead into our next question.
Which happens to be, Bill, do you have a regular program for testing 911 and plan to monitor compliance? It's all up to you now, Bill. And you got to get yourself off mute.
All right. You can't lip read. Okay, sounds good. All right. So absolutely, yes. That's a situation where we've got a, hold on one sec here. I've got issues here with my computer.
What do you want to share something or?
Okay. Yes, it's absolutely a necessity for testing and also to monitor on an ongoing basis. A client is always in the process of changing, and during those changes, things break. And so things like network services, user changes, moves, adds, and changes, whenever an enterprise does any of these trigger events, it tends to break things. It requires an ongoing and diligent process of monitoring the 911 solution as well as just testing. Testing is a two-step process. Scheduling the test with the PSAP in a legacy environment, but also with the newer solutions with network services with VPC, there's such a thing as 933 calling, so that an automated callback or readback actually provides the location identity. So there's ways for a user to actually test, and that two-step process, obviously, in a legacy environment is a necessity. The VPC environment is actually pretty slick because you dial 933 and the callback or the playback actually does give you a location for that. So that's an ongoing thing that takes place.
Yeah, and so this is while Bill thinks about this, this is another important thing to talk about with your clients is you don't just install it and forget it. It needs to be tested. It needs to be monitored to ensure that that things are updated. Because the last time you want to test, the last time you'd want to be testing it is when the emergency actually happens. You don't want that to be your test.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's I fixed what I was dealing with here. The service offerings, I mean, things trigger events like service offerings that go away, like T1, PRI, like we're experiencing right now. That's an event that could screw up 911. Changes in the network itself, the emergency services network can occur that can drastically change the database provisioning to the telcos. Communities are upgrading their network to an ESN network for NG 911. We're seeing legacy PS-ALI databases that are being orphaned by the incumbent as this new provider is now providing services for 911. And if we look at the actual test calls themselves, the test calls are confirming routing as well as dispatchable locations. So it's imperative that on an ongoing basis, the user or the enterprise organization is actually going through this process. And if we look at the actual testing of the call itself, there's things that need to actually be verified prior to the testing. There's the PS-ALI or the VPC database. That's where this location that the PSAP dispatch would actually see as the call has been presented to them. That has to be verified prior to the testing. And then on an ongoing basis, the VPC the VPC service national databases could very well be a necessity on an ongoing basis to go through this process of testing.
Well, Bill, that sounds like a great lead-in for the next question.
Yeah.
You're reading the script, Bill. Cut it out.
Right.
Can I just add another important point to Bill's comment about the testing? I think it's also you can get resources from like ITIL standards and things like that, but because of the new legal regulations, I think it's going to be all the more important to have, you know, professional documented test plans done, and at least probably annually or every couple of years, just so you can prove things, because if otherwise you can't, you know, you increase your risk. So.
Yeah, it's not just having the test plan, but having the results of executing the test as well.
Exactly. And that it has to be documented and archived and managed, right? So.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point.
So that leads.
Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, so thanks. So Bill, and back to you again, Bill and Roberta. So what are the cost elements to maintain my 911 location database and connectivity? Good question.
Can you go to the next? Oh, there you go. Thank you.
Yeah. And so I'll take care of the actual technology elements and IT operation elements, and Roberta will actually take on the operation sides of thing as well. If we look at the technology elements, first is the enterprise application, and in reality, no one size fits all. We could look at a very simplistic database exchange between an enterprise and the network itself, setting up the location identification as well as the actual transport of the 911 calls. But in many instances, the larger the organization, the requirement for a 911 application or platform is really a requirement, which then monitors the user movement as well as maintains the database into the telco and the telco databases itself. The database network is also a very important component in this. So we've got the first is the application that sits on the enterprise premises itself, but the actual database is almost a mirror to what's in the network itself. So there are recurring element charges that take place, and that's typically on a TN basis or a record element basis. And then one other thing that's a very critical portion of a network element or a charge is the ECC charges that take place in a VPC environment. So if, for instance, the enterprise does not have a provision location properly done within the network, it'll show up as a record not found. That will immediately trigger an event which will steer the call to an ECC, an emergency call center. And typically the service provider will charge that enterprise a $75 call charge. So that's on a per call basis, and that can quickly add up to substantial fees over a monthly basis. So that's something to consider as number one, you're contracting with the service provider to see whether or not there might be some number of emergency services calls that can be lumped into the ongoing recurring fee for the overall service, and or keep an eye on that as it gets to ramp up. One last thing.
Hey, Bill?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Just real quick, I've seen charges for those operator assist calls be as high as $150. Just FYI, that's a great point.
Roberta,
Yeah.
do we have as much range in Canada on those costs? Are you seeing that too?
Yeah, same thing in Canada, except first time can be at $775 to $150, but then you can get it up to, if you keep doing it, it could be like $1,000, $2,000. They'll keep taking up the charges.
Thank you.
One thing that we've seen too in the past is typically healthcare providers, for whatever reason, are generating a lot of 911 calls. And if in fact they're not properly provisioned, all of a sudden that actual enterprise could receive a substantial bill just for those ECC calls. So getting back to the original question that we were looking at before of maintaining and on an ongoing basis testing, this is really critical in a VPC environment because you will get nicked pretty substantially on a per call basis. One last thing that I'd like to talk about on the database side is additional rich data. Depending upon how and the depth and detail the organization wishes to provide to the PSAP, charges that typically would be levied with rapid SOS with additional rich data. If it's not properly configured, like some organizations will do within the service itself to cover that in the TN charges, that additional fee could actually increase the per monthly charge directly as well. One last thing that I want to talk about with network elements is that the IT side of things get involved with 911. When you go to put in place 911 in an organization, typically you've got either a per seat charge, and that can go directly to the desktop. It could go to a zone or a region, and in some instances, which we're seeing happening more and more, is the charge is actually a charge based on a pseudo ANI. So the charges can actually be greatly reduced by the utilization of a pseudo ANI. So all of these things can actually drive the cost either up or down depending upon the configuration and the design of the solution. One last thing is, if the user does decide to go with zones, well, then think of it this way. I've had clients like GE Medical Systems, or GE Medical, where a zone or a WAN configuration was for 2 buildings as opposed to just a floor. So now that we approach the IT department saying, no, actually we need to have these things broken apart. We need to have a zone based on a floor at least. That's a major change to the IT infrastructure and such. One last thing that we need to talk about is the actual connection to the 911 service provider. As we look at the legacy side of things, which seem to be going away with PRI and T1 and such being, decommissioned and such, we're looking at SIP provisioning of 911 calls, and oftentimes we need edge devices that will be certified and be able to handle the 911 calls as they transcend the network out of the private network and into the public service network.
So I know we've got about 10 minutes left, and we'd like to hear from Roberta on this topic as well.
Yeah, I'm done.
And
Thanks.
We have some time for questions or not. So Roberta, before we finish up with you, what I'm going to ask everyone to do between now and our next session, because it looks like we're going to have another session, is so far what we've been doing is kind of the survey level of a bunch of topics at kind of a high level. So start thinking about your questions and seeing what we might want to dig in deeper to in our next session. And you can send those to me and we'll organize them, but get them to me in a week or so, within a week or so we have time to organize.
Okay.
But it would be great if Roberta could finish off her time.
Yeah. Okay. And Beth, just put your email in the chat window. Okay.
Yeah, we'll do that. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, Roberta, the floor is yours.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, additional things to think about from an ongoing management, just one point to support Bill's. There's also the whole, like any other software, there's that whole issue of license management for the 911 applications, right? And that takes IT staff to be able to do that. So you want to make sure, and you don't want to over-engineer. And as much as we love to have Jerry and Fletch get more money, we want to make sure that we have appropriate licensing. One of the things that's really quite interesting, looking at the resources, the corporate-wide resources, this work is really, and Steve's and I've been working together, he's really finding it out. This work is really also very much corporate management consulting, because you have to in order to make it happen with large institutions, and those of you that are doing this stuff know this, like the airport stuff, you have to have 911 task force or steering committee at a senior level, because you include legal, finance, risk management, public safety, security, public relations, procurement to develop the future direction and strategy. And then you've got to have the PM resources to develop project charters, get the initial financial requirements, like an RFI to go to the market. You've got to have knowledge of CAD, the computer aided design, and computer assisted dispatch, blueprints, GPS, and all the PSAP organizations. And it's really spread across all departments. So you've got massive corporate changes required to make this happen and to do it safely. So it's a complex technologies, but it's also complex consulting. That's to me, it's one of the appeals, because I like the funky stuff. When you get into the people, process, and policies, it's very different from unified communications and call center solutions. So for example, up front, you've got to have, again, the legal, professional, and financial resources to acquire the 911 location solution vendors. You got to get to know the vendors and know who's in the space. And then you really also have to define and work through, what do you want things to happen? How do you want things to happen? And define that so that the tech vendors can take that and make sure the technology is going to be able to work. And you also, because it's complex integration, you have to be able to give them the information so that they know about the environment. So it's not a 2-3 page RFI or RFP as Jerry and Fletch know. It's a lot of, it takes a lot of information that we as the consultants and our clients have to provide in order to be able to support that. It's interesting that the resources to do the change management parts and the training programs and the internal and external PR. So think about a hospital where you might have to have signage if you're going to change things. And signage, and whether things are on, phones in an operating room compared to phones, signs in a waiting room. So you have to get all of that people side of the things worked out, and to support the changes that you're doing because of the new technologies that you're adding. And then the last part is the ongoing resources, and I talked about that when I added on to Bill's other comment, for regular audits and compliance. And again, that involves a cross section of corporate departments. So, and the stakeholders. So it's not just IT doing software testing and making some calls. So when I've done them for the corporate enterprise clients for the past 15 years, I got to be buddies with the public safety and security and all that kind of stuff. And, IT said, well, what are they being involved in? So it's really, really much broader. And then again, because of the legal risk and impact, you really need to make sure this is a high up in the organization game as well. So to make sure that you get access and executive support for corporate risk review and management sign off, because otherwise IT, you can't just have buddies and friends in IT, because they're not going to be able to get the support. So we have to be beside them, as Steve and I have been learning together, to get up high in the organizations, and we have to translate our messages to the different stakeholders, right? So, we just did a workshop and we had a cross section of the people, and, 1 minute I'm talking to the security guy as a PSAP, because they had their own PSAPs. Yeah. Next minute, Steve's talking to the senior network architect. So we had a broad range of people that we had to work with. So I just wanted to just help you see that this is really complex management and technology consulting, but it is a niche market, and it's really necessary. And the good thing is that it is going to save lives, and it's going to make public safety be able to do things faster and easier with the information.
And it can be a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, but it's pretty interesting work, actually.
I mean a lot of billing. That's what I meant.
I know that too. Yeah. So, anyways, that's any questions for Bill and I on our question?
Hey, Roberta, if I'd like to make just a real quick general comment, if I could.
Sure. I figured you would.
Well, you know me. Good minds think alike. I talk to Hank on a regular basis, and I've become very good friends with him and the family, and I've been keeping him up to date with all the work that you and everybody on this committee and task force has put into this entire project. And being a simple cowboy from East Texas, he had no idea what this problem was until he bit into it, and he understands the work that everybody has put into this, to help fix the problem. And that's what Hank has wanted from the beginning, that this does not happen to anybody else's daughter. It's the number one thing that he wanted to get out of all of this. And he just wanted me to extend to all of you his personal gratitude and thanks for taking the time to adding this to your expertise and what you do for people, and all of the information that you bring into the environments, from complex airports to complex campuses to operational procedures. And I got to tell you, I've known each and every one of you very, very well for several years. I am also very proud of you, number one, for understanding a very complex environment, but for translating that into something that is consumable by the general public in the enterprise, and that will lead to saved lives. So on behalf of Hank and behalf of myself, thank you all very, very much for everything you've all contributed.
Thank you, Fletch. Great to hear.
Mm.
So one of the things that we've been teasing about is this document repository. Our panel has been based on what we developed as a list of frequently asked questions that we believe your clients will be asking you. And as I mentioned, we did kind of a survey level across all of those questions. The documents we have are, we have a short version of the frequently asked questions and a long version of the frequently asked questions. And once again, we find ourselves at the top of the hour and out of time. So what I'd like to suggest is that we start the next session with, showing you guys around those documents and where to find them and what's in them. And from there, move on to a couple of specific subjects that may be suggested by people in email. Say, I'd really like to hear more about this, or I have questions about this, and make the next panel a lot more interactive. What do you guys think of that?
Did you say interactive or interesting? I'm just kidding.
Neither, Steve, neither.
No. It was great. Thank you, everybody. Really.
Steve, just one quick thing. I'd also like to say, I'd like for the next session, Beth, and if I'm speaking out of turn, then you can tell me so. But I think it would also be, we'd like to give a chance to our VAC members to answer questions. So if the consultants want a chance to ask the guys, because they've really been, very helpful as well. So I think they should get their 2 cents worth on opportunity as well.
Right. Well, in Fletch's case, it'll be 3 cents, right, or something.
Well, we'll give Jerry 3 cents instead for a change.
Yeah, right. And I echo that. Absolutely. I know they're not, official part of the panel, but certainly they have been more than present in helping us get educated and really building this.
Yeah.
Is that a comment on Mark's billing rate?
No.
There you go. Well, thanks everybody for today's fireside chat, and we will see you again next week, and we'll schedule part 4 with Beth shortly, and we'll let you know what it is.
Happy Independence Day, everybody.
Thank
you.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Stay safe.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah, happy We Hate Canada Day.
Oh, come on. Be nice down there in the South. Take care.
I know.
Leave the North. Bye.